Hey guys, what's up? What's up? How are you? I thought it's so fitting to play this because normally it's Friday and it's Friday, y'all, but it's Thursday for us. And without further ado, Steve is hosting today and I'm co-hosting. So without further ado, this is
Oh, that's
Steve.
a change. I forgot we were doing that. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
This is
Gear
Aletha and
shift. I'm
Steve.
in. I'm explaining.
This is Aletha and Steve coming to you live with a chat
I'm
about
in Albany,
mindset.
right? Where
Yes.
you're in what's your town in Washington?
Marysville, Washington.
Yeah.
So
I'm Albany, New York
you're
for
in
now.
cold and it's
Upstate.
raining here, and I'm sure it's nice
Surprise.
here.
It's actually, yeah, we got a little bit of rain today. It's cool though. It's all good.
Mhm.
Um yeah, so today's conversation is going to be a segment of the One Pointed Mind workshops. We're taking a piece out of that teaching and going to be discussing essentially the structures of some of the structures of mind according to Vedanta. It's an ancient Vedic tradition how they examined the structures of mind, and it's important, I think, at the onset to understand that there's so many different perspectives around like what the structures of mind are depending on the philosophies. There's words that are going to be used, and we say this often, words are pointers, but there's words that are going to be used that may have cultural connotations within the West that weren't necessarily. We're using the word, for instance, we'll use the word ego, but the way the Vedics used the word ego was maybe a little bit different than we might use the word ego. And for a lot of our understanding of the word ego is Freudian,
Right.
out of the the psychoanalytic fields of understanding the structures of mind. We'll use the same word, but it might have a little bit of a different meaning, but we'll get into that eventually.
All
And this
right.
conversation came out of a conversation Aletha, or this, yeah, so these ideas came from a conversation that Aletha and I had last night when we were brainstorming what it is that we might want to do. And we ended up in a 2-hour talk, and it actually came back around full circle to a really interesting conversation
Yeah.
about what how can we when we find ourselves in a state of disconnection between what you were saying, Aletha, correct me, help me with this, like where
Okay.
the brain and the heart are not in sync, and there's a
Right.
bit of what was the word you were using? I had the
So we
incon
were talking about what happened last week when you were giving us that guided meditation, right? And
mm,
I made a notice that my body temperature actually increased, which is unusual for me because my body temperature when I meditate is normally cold, lower. And so, because of my biofeedback class, I went back to that and hooked myself up and listened to you again and noticed that my body temperature went up. And it's because when you follow a certain pattern of breathing, you go incoherence. And when you go incoherence, your heart and your brain are in coherence and they're going at the same pattern. So your body temperature actually increases.
so you're using the coherence in the sense of like a consistency between the two of them. They
Consistency.
become synchronistic. Would that be
Yes,
a way
that's
you're saying it?
exactly right.
Yeah.
And
So
so
for a while, I was picking on you because I thought you were saying inconsistent. And I was just like, that doesn't sound like the right use of the word.
that accent.
Inconsistency. So funny. So once we started to talk about that, we were just then we the next step of the conversation was around first of all, how does that imbalance happen, or when it does come into synchronicity, when these two, what we were initially, the conversation was around two organs,
Hmm.
heart and brain, but then according to our teachings and what we're studying and what we're learning, and there's a lot of interesting this talks around this idea of the brain and the heart are, yes, organs, but within the system, the deeper levels of systems, there's an energy center also that
Yeah,
is more of a cloud, I guess, maybe you would see it in that way, but more of like an energy center around. And when those two are out of sync,
yeah,
then right, so the question was, the chicken and the egg sort of deal.
yeah,
Then coming bound full circle of saying, okay, what can we do? Like, yes, there's a meditation practice, which we're going to begin with a meditation practice in a minute, but and through the conversation, we started to talk about the idea of, yes, we actually fall out of sync, primarily our experience, our conscious experience that occurs within the mind. And by understanding what's going on within the mind at a particular time, you can help. You can spot incoherence
Right.
and imbalance. And what can you do to not only with the meditation practice to get down and centered, but then when you're observing the mind, how does that appear when we're out of sync,
Mm.
inconsistent with with those two realms. So what we'll do today is we're going to talk about the structures of mind, the four primitive functions of mind according to Vedanta. Uh, it's important for me to note that I got this teaching through the American Meditation Institute, in Leonard Perlmutter, Ram Lev out of upstate New York, and AmericanMeditation.org. Shout out to him and the entire program. That's on so many levels. They saved my life, completely saved
Mm.
my life. So that's my channel. His lineage is through Swami Rama of the Himalayas, and then back thousands of years. The Yoga Sutras is, from what I'm understanding, I'm happy to be corrected, but the Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras, and that's one of the first um, public, at least written records of this discussion that we're going to be having today. 3000 BC, something like
Right.
that. Probably not the originator of the ideas. He maybe is, but oftentimes these individuals are simply the ones that document it, right? So
Right.
we'll give
Right.
credit to him, sure, whatever. But um, so anything to add before we get into a meditation? Thoughts?
No, do you want to go into the meditation first and then we talk about it afterwards?
Yeah,
What
I think
what would you
sooner the better.
say? All right, here we
Gonna be
go.
a simple one. It's not gonna be overboard. It's gonna be a really simple experience that we're gonna have. So we're gonna start with a 3 second breath to a 4 second breath. 3 second inhalation, 4 second exhalation.
Mm-hmm.
Five in, six out.
Okay.
7 in, 8 out. 9 in, 10 out. And then we're gonna work our way back down again. Um, and there's a lot of processing that's going to be happening here. So we're just sitting down, and we're all busy, right? We're sitting down for a second. So observe the fact that the mind's going to keep on moving. Listen to the guidance, feel the posture, feel the movement of the breath, and the best you can, keep your awareness moving through the body. I'm going to be guiding the count, so you don't have to worry too much about the count itself. I'll track the count,
Mm.
and I'm going to hint at you to continue to move through the body, the eyes, the lips, the ears. We're going to survey the body first, and then we're going to bring ourselves to the breathing. Okay. And just to point out, sorry, but this practice, the introduction piece that I'm giving to you, could take a longer than it would be if you yourself were to do it yourself. I think
Right.
I mentioned that before in one of
Yeah.
the earlier meditations. You can go through this process relatively quickly. I'm just going to point them out to you so that you touch them. So
Right.
then as you're breathing, you can keep moving and touching different areas. And that's going to help keep you out of the thinking. And it's going to
Right.
help keep you into the body and into the breath. You have to deliberately keep your attention on something, or it's just going to get sucked back up into the mind. Okay.
Right.
So
I
that's going
think
to be your job while we're going through the breathing. My job is to just be centered, focused, and guiding the count for you. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So let's let go. Eyes are gently closed. Mouth is gently closed. Teeth are barely touching. Let the lips relax, jaw muscles relax, cheeks around the eyes and eyelids relaxed. Not to sleep, just to feel and relax. Forehead is as smooth as a piece of silk. Move through the scalp and feel the scalp relaxed around the ears, muscles around the ears, the throat, and neck. Move down to the shoulders, down the arms, the elbows, to the wrists, to the palms, to the fingertips. Center of the chest. There's no rush. It's just a deliberate movement. Into the belly. Let the belly relax. As you're in the belly and the breath moves, you'll notice the inhalation should let the belly open. Exhalation should let the belly fall. Inhalation in and open. Exhalation down, out. Move to the hips and the thighs, the knees, the calves, the ankles, soles of the feet and the toes. And from the toes to the hips, become aware of the legs. Include the belly, include the chest, and the shoulders down to the fingertips, the neck and throat, face and head. And from the crown to the toes, there's the body. Now let's expand the inhalation. Bring your awareness to the center of the chest and take a 3-second inhalation through the nose or mouth. 2, 3, fully in, and then 4 out, nice and smooth. 2, 3, 4, 5 in, however the body needs to take the air. 3, 4, 5, and 6 out. 4, 5, 6, 7 in. And keep the awareness moving through the body and the face, the chest, the arms, the feet, legs. No rush. 7, and out for 8. Nice and smooth, steady breath. And for 9, 4, 5, 6. Fully in. Get that extra little 10% of the air at the top and gently transition out for 10. Steady and smooth. No rush. You got it. The mind will come in. Stay down in the chest and the body. 9, 10. Out for 9. 8, 9. In for 8. Extra 10% at the top. Out for 7. 5, 6, 7. In for 6. No rush. Out for 5. Gently. Full breath in for 4. Nice and steady, but full. And out for 3. Now just let the body breathe. Keep the eyes closed. Stay in the posture. No movement. Become aware of the body again. You survey. Start with the lips and the teeth and move through the body as you did at the start. Touch the point and keep moving. And just feel. The intention is to feel. There's no expectation. And surrender to the feeling. Fall into the body. Fall down. Observe how the body moves with the breath. And with the third breath, after the next 3 breaths, the third exhalation, you're going to gently open your eyes. Fully in and out. Fully in. That's 2 and out. 1 more. Fully in. And gently open the eyes with the exhalation. No moving. Again, survey the body from the start to the end. Lips, through the head, the arms, chest and belly, and legs and feet. Be aware of the space. The inner world and the outer world. The movement of mind can be observed. The breath can be observed. The body can be observed. Be rooted in the center of the chest. And lovingly go about your day.
Mm, that's beautiful.
Mm, nice.
That was a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good one.
I felt a lot of the movement, in particular, right behind the neck when the cool, when you do the breath, especially in the 6 to 10 length, there's a cooling effect that happens as your body release that parasympathetic.
Mm,
And so mine was in the back of my neck because that's where a lot of my tension was. It may be different for other people. It might be in the middle of their brain, which is where most of the time the feeling will occur. That cool, tingling feeling of relaxing. That's when the
yeah.
sympathetic nerve is just triggered and it's releasing some good hormones. That
Sometimes I'll actually feel it in my belly. Yeah.
mm,
When the belly, when I can get the belly to loosen up and release some tension, and that brings us to the conversation we were having last night. I think we can transition. It's a nice transition into where we were when we were talking about the process of breathing
right.
and how the belly needs to be open and fluid, and how the belly I came at it from a point of energy, like, so when I'm doing a lot of the therapy work and the sound healing work that I'll do, the practices that I'm doing, a lot of the deep breathing and the movement of energy and with the sound and everything else, it's like you're trying to get, it's, I find with a lot of people and with myself to be included, that there's a lot of tension in the belly.
Right.
Now, there's a physiological explanation for that, in that when we have these slow trickles of tension and stress through the day, these individual little thoughts are the droppers of the stress hormones are being slowly but deliberately and intentionally, because that's what the body needs in order to handle a stressful situation within the fight or flight response. um, they're it's a slow process, so we actually are intoxicating our body. We're
Yeah.
becoming toxic with these extra stress hormones. It sits in the belly. There was a study that was done some years ago. I wish I could cite it, but you could find it. It was they were talking about like something of like 90% of the synaptic gaps do not
Mhm.
exist in the brain. They actually exist within the web of the guts.
Right.
So 90%. So when we're talking about serotonin imbalance, and we're talking, it's only 10% in the brain. The rest of it is
Right.
actually in the belly, which is
Right.
a trip, right? So there's no wonder when you don't feel well, you feel it in the belly. That's literally what it is.
Right.
So through the years of having that slow trickle of the stress hormones, what we're doing is, the mind is doing, and the body is doing, is it's storing it because it has nowhere to burn it, particularly if we're not exercising. There's nowhere to there's nothing to do with it. So it just stays in the guts. And as
Right.
it stays in the guts get rock hard with tension and stress. I came at it from a perspective of energy, but you were talking about it actually in a physiological level.
Right.
And we were talking about where do we find those overlaps? And you find the overlaps is where the truths exist. There's two things can happen at the same time and be true, right? So
Yeah.
and then our conversations spiraled. So I've been doing a lot of work on my belly. That's where I carry a lot of the stress for myself.
Well, you could even go even further and talk about the polyvagal theory, that talks about the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is an access from the brain to the gut. It's a continual connection from brain to gut, and so when the brain is exuding all these hormones, and especially stress hormones, where's it going? It's going to the gut. Then we can even go further into another discussion next week where we talk about the negative feedback and understanding what happens when there's a thought, and the thought drives the hormones, and the hormones itself drives how the chemicals are going into your body.
That's a
So
good conversation. I think actually this is a good lead up to that, so that we can understand what's going on within the mind.
mhm.
And this is, from my point of view, the conversation we're having today, I would say, at least in my life, is some of the most important knowledge I've ever learned,
Yes, yes. So let's talk about,
irrespective of the topic.
would you like to talk about the slides that you have to just solidify that some more?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All
Actually,
right.
I want to give credit where credit's due.
Okay.
So, the Heart and Science of Yoga from Leonard Perlmutter. You can write that down.
Okay.
That's where I get this knowledge from. Okay. He is a remarkable person, a
All right.
blessing to so many people.
So,
All right, so what we're doing is we're talking about the four functions of mind, and um, we're all right. Sorry, we were joking last night. I was going to say next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to do the best that we can in getting through this relatively quickly. This is going to be a cursory conversation, but some of the it's going to require. This is our conversation. This is our discussion. So
mm,
when in this philosophy, there's an idea that there is a center of being. So if we can't agree, or someone doesn't believe that there is a center of being, essentially a center of consciousness, a state of consciousness, a consciousness from which everything is perceived,
mm,
then this isn't the talk for you. Then it's not gonna. Just the idea that there is a state of consciousness that could potentially exist separate from everything else to observe everything that's happening. That's the foundation of this philosophy. The idea that that center of being, called the soul in some traditions, but not all, it is something that is eternal. It is consciousness. It is conscious. It is actually consciousness itself in the deepest levels of wisdom, the deepest levels from which genius and wisdom arise. And it speaks to different people in different ways. It's spoken to different cultures in different ways. This is where I really love the conversations of Carl Jung and his
mhm,
ideas of the archetypes that were constructed throughout civilizations. They are consistent because there is a source, a wellspring from which that information comes. That's this. Okay. And it in and of itself is bliss in the sense of it is balanced. It doesn't there is not a sense of discontentment within its essence. The discontentment exists within the mind itself. Everything is harmonious, right? I
mm,
remember a conversation of Russell Brand and Eckhart Tolle, and Eckhart Tolle was telling Russell Brand, align your purpose with the purpose of the universe, and then let everything else just go away and just
mm,
keep working, right? The purpose of the universe is to exist. The purpose of the universe is to find balance. The purpose of the universe is to be harmonious.
mm,
That's what it works toward. It works towards balance. It maintains balance in every facet of its existence, right? So there's that is ultimately, therefore, if you want to entertain the idea of aligning our purpose with the purpose of the universe, that is our purpose: to exist, to find balance, to be harmonious. That's our purpose. Our calling might be a different conversation. The calling is maybe, what are you called to do within this lifetime? What do you feel within yourself that is your intention of being here? And how do you interact with people? Or why are you waking up in the morning? What are you doing for work and hobbies and et cetera, et cetera? That's that. The purpose of it is to align ourselves with this essence.
mm,
Okay. Next is the body. We're drawing a circle around the body. Okay, so when I'm talking about the body, we're talking about the words that we speak, the thoughts that happen within the mind, and the actions that are taken. When we're talking about the body, it's synonymous with that which is observable, which is measurable. So this is action in the world with that circle. That's what that circle means. The next is, you'll see that there are spokes that connect the center of being with the body. The center of the hub of the wheel is the soul. The spokes of the wheel are the mind and the four functions of mind. And then the outer ring is, what do we actually observe in our actions? And to what extent are our actions in alignment with the center hub? When you look at a wheel, that center hub doesn't move, that's still. No different than the stillness that you experience in deep meditation. That center observer, that's it. That's the place, and you can commune with that, right? Um, then you got the outer body, and then you got the spokes. So if we have a spoke that is out of balance, the actions are not going to be skillful. That's the simplicity of the belief system. Okay. Now you cannot take away one of these spokes either, otherwise the wheel's going to collapse. So when we talk about an ego, We're not interested in saying, okay, well, we don't want to have an ego and we want to walk. I got a kick out of some of the earlier, my early experiences in dealing with spiritualism and studying with people, taking different retreats. And the individual, and I mean, I don't mean any disrespect with this, but it was awkward for me for someone to talk about themselves in the third person while I was in the presence with them. Like I understand it, like, I guess, like, if Steve's upset, like, I get it, like, that's an egoic reference, you know what I mean? But the person, like, there was no affiliation whatsoever, or the attempt to not have an affiliation with the ego itself, which was actually just simply the ego itself anyway, which is funny, right? So try as you may, you're not going to eliminate it. So don't waste your time. It's about balancing these functions
Mm,
in a healthy way, so that you can establish a state of equanimity within the mind. And then when the imbalance exists in the mind, you can see it because it feels awkward. It doesn't feel good. It feels like fear. It feels like anger. It feels like resentment. It feels like anxiety, right?
mhm,
But being able to observe, first of all, the fact that that is even a potentiality, that can possibly exist, that I can sit and observe the functions of the mind. That's the first. Like I said, like, if you can't see that, or at least acknowledge or entertain that the center of being is a place to sit and observe, and it is not in and of itself the mind, that's the foundation of in order to take this to the next step. Okay,
right.
so we have, what do we got next? I think one of the first functions is, on this slide here. Yeah, the first function is the senses. So our thoughts, our words, and our actions can be a result of the five senses. Hit the slide, hon.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So, oh, just once. 'Cause they're gonna, yeah, they don't want to go that way. Oh, wait. Go back. Okay. So,
Okay, just
we
once.
have the senses. Yes. So we may take an action, or we may think a thought as a result of taste, smell, hearing, seeing, or
Feeling?
taste, smell, see, hear, feel. So if I'm cold, I'll feel the temperature of the room, and then I'll go out and I'll get a sweater. Okay. So the action was determined by that function of mind, which detected the senses.
Mhm.
Okay. So there I got out. What I put on could be informed by something else, a habit pattern, the ego wanting to look a certain way, blah, blah, blah. But nonetheless, the action was taken, was perpetuated by the sensations. I want to eat something, right? The senses are detecting that I want to eat. What do I eat is then also going to be determined by unconscious habit patterns, or higher consciousness saying this is probably better for your body, right? Not just the donut. Yes, that's pure, but just because you have a donut ain't bad either. But do you want six donuts? No, you want one donut. So there's other functions that are going to step in and say, okay, well, one's enough, or maybe just a half, right?
Yeah.
All right. So,
I experienced that this morning, to tell you the truth. I
oh,
was
yeah,
like, what do I want to eat? And my body was just saying, you need banana, you need this. And but I'm like, but the bagel, not the bagel, but the waffle sounds good. They're like, no, no, you're gonna get some
yeah.
this.
Yeah. I'm a sucker for peanut butter and jelly toast.
Yeah,
What was
and
interesting today? Today, actually, I woke up and I had no craving. It was just straight
yeah.
hot water until 1 o'clock, 1:30.
Mm,
Right? It
wow.
just was what it was. So what was able to, in that instance, for both of us, it wasn't just succumbing to the habit pattern. Like I said, for me, it's been toast and peanut butter and jelly and a cup of decaf coffee. Right?
Right.
That's the move. But there was something that, other than the simple unconscious habit of making toast, something else was kicking in, and the soul center.
Right.
That's the capital I. That's the one that was listening today. Tomorrow, and maybe the sense is saying, nope, you just, let's go for the toast and jelly. Okay, that's fine, cool, whatever. It's not personal. It just is what it is, right? The next piece is the senses. I'm sorry, the ego. Yeah, the senses is finished. So the ego is, this is an interesting one, and this is where I want to emphasize again. We're not trying to conflate with Jungian or Freudian belief of, or notions of the ego. Not that there's anything wrong with those perspectives. It's just that that's not what this is founded in. It's a different. So they called it ahankara, and in their belief, it was essentially the function of the mind that identifies the fact that there is an identity and a separation of this vantage point of consciousness and everything else that exists in the world, everything that exists in the universe. I exist because the function of that function of mind allows the potential for the conception of I to even exist.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so at any point, if I'm clear, like you get clarification, then go for it, right?
Right.
Um, so I and you wouldn't have this conversation if it weren't for Ahankara within the functions of our mind to see you there, me here, and then to even address you as something other than me. It's a limited perspective, though. While it is true, there is certain degrees of separation. There is also certain degrees of knowing of the connection that you and I have at a deeper level, beyond
Mm-hmm.
the mind, beyond the ego, beyond race, beyond gender, beyond all the nonsensical crap that we get caught up in our day to day, right? There's
Yeah.
something deeper and we know it. So ego in this case, in our case, you and I, and in other situations, at least for now, in this relationship, as we're having a conversation, is not completely 100% in control. When we
Right.
get enraged, then that separation becomes even greater. And I see you as an object. Say you're offense, like there's an affront, something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you know the feeling. I'm not worried about this hokey pokey connection with everything in the universe kind of nonsense. This dude is threatening me, or this person is threatening me, and I am at risk. Truly at risk. My bodily, I had a friend of mine. She had a confrontation with a man over the weekend, and it wasn't pretty,
Mm.
and she's okay, but it was a very bad situation for her, where I don't want to get further into details, but nonetheless it was a clear situation. Ego needs to be working right now.
Mm-hmm.
Ego has to work, otherwise my safety, as both a psychological and physical safety, are at risk for the rest of my life. I need to be careful here, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's ego. That's good. Keeping that separation, right? What
Okay.
I like to cycle. So if I'm riding my bike down the road, I need a healthy dose of ego to keep me from getting smacked by a bus, because I'm just one with the universe, just floating around on my bike right through the intersection. I'll just trust God. Well, there's sorry, buddy. You had to look both ways. Mom
Yeah.
taught you that when you were a kid. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so just, and I want to emphasize that we're not trying to get rid of it. It's about having a healthy relationship with it. Now,
That's
the
right.
trouble with the ego is that, according to this philosophy, is that its voice, the voice of the ego is I lack,
Mm.
I lack, because everything is outside of me, and I am only this measly little man, Steve, sitting here. And anything that's outside of me has the potential to harm me. So therefore, I need to be strong. I need to be this, or I need to be that, or I need to, if nothing else, I need to be afraid. Or if something on the outside is preventing me from being able to achieve what it is that I want, I'm going to become angry
This is
because
very
I
important.
want it.
I want you to
So
say that again, because this is very important in the evolution of spiritual transformation. When we start understanding what the ego is saying to ourselves, the ego is trying to push us outward instead of going inward to find the solution. So when you said I lack, that's very important for the audience to hear this. So say
very
that
important.
again. I lack,
The
but
voice
I
of the
need
ego
this.
is I lack.
Right.
That's its mantra.
Mm-hmm.
Not I am wholeness. Not I am connected. I am peace. I am content. I
Yeah.
lack nothing. I have a friend of mine, his mantra ended up becoming I lack nothing. That had to
Mm.
be his mantra for a while,
Okay.
because it
That's
was, and he lacks nothing. He
yeah.
lacks nothing, but it was the voice, the conditioning, who the hell knows, that would always keep him from being able to take that step, or to feel a sense of insecurity with his body, or with his, or whatever. You lack nothing,
Right.
man. You're a king. And
Yeah.
walk in there like you're a goddamn king and own it. You know what I mean? And that's not ego either. It
No.
doesn't need to be. It could be, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be just sitting in a state of contentment and having the ego in check. The little
Right.
voice, the little boy and the little girl in the head that keeps you where you often are rooted, or in some sort of psychological loop, right?
Right.
So touch basically quickly on the ideas of the fear and the anger again, because this is the clearest way that we can identify when the mind and the ego are out of whack. Fear sometimes is necessary. We know that.
Yeah.
Just because you're sad doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Just because you're afraid doesn't mean it's a bad thing or angry, right? But it's the perpetual process that you experience of perpetual fear, perpetual anger, perpetual sadness, perpetual insecurity or angst. That's where the problem comes in. And
Right.
we've said this a number of times before. It's not a problem just because you have an emotional movement. That please don't lose it, because that's what's human. That's what we want, to have these experiences. But when it's perpetual, when I got irritated with the internet when my parents came out, like that's quick, but it wasn't perpetual. Okay,
Right.
so fear of losing what you have or not getting what you want, according to the teaching here, when you experience fear, it's an egoic movement. I'm afraid of losing what I have, or I'm afraid of not getting what I want. One of the two. So then you ask yourself, what do I lack? I'm afraid of losing a relationship. You
Hmm.
lack nothing. Doesn't mean you still don't want to maintain the relationship and do things to make sure that you're fueling the relationship so that it's healthy. But there's times when we cling to a relationship because we're afraid of being without it. Like, you lack
Right.
nothing.
Yeah.
So know that, and then perceive the situation with that
Right.
knowing, and don't dupe yourself in these little trick conversations like it's a real feeling. And having the peak experiences of meditation give you the chance to tap into that centeredness. And then it's a knowing. It's not a conceit. It's a
Hmm.
humility that's speaking, but it's just a simple fact. When you're angry, you have a thwarted desire. I want something that I'm not getting. So therefore anger kicks in. What do you want? Well, Tommy wants a toy. Right? So when Tommy is observing the toy, and we know this, we talked about this before, you've heard this again, but so if Tommy's as a little baby is seeking to get that toy, it's because the ego is thinking, I lack. When I acquire that toy, I
Right.
acquire more. And then an entire sense of enhancement comes naturally from the external world. I've heard it said before, actually, that the one of the earliest sources of this thinking in this structure of mind is nursing with the infant and the mother, where the infant observes that sustenance exists outside of me.
Mm.
The warmth comes from my mother,
Right.
right?
Right.
And other things around me are happening, and my mother is holding me, and she's my security. That's a natural process, right? But that's the foundation of what we're discussing here. But then through maturity and learning, we can examine it in a deeper way. But that's interesting, if nonetheless.
It
um
is.
yeah. um Unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is the habit patterns of the mind. Now, this isn't the Freudian unconscious necessarily, or the Jungian unconscious, but it can be also in a sense as well. But what they're talking about here is essentially just our previous experiences that we have as children, as human beings. Perhaps even the conversation is open to the evolutionary unconscious mind within the reptilian brains and the reptilian processes, the flinches, the reflexes. It doesn't even go to our brain. It's just our mind has no option but to see something and be startled, or to flinch quick. That just happens, right? So we have so many things that we say, that we do, that we think, based upon simply unconscious habit patterns.
Yep.
Those are changeable. So with the unconscious, what we do is we allow the unconscious thoughts to come into the conscious mind. And then when they enter the conscious mind, we do something with it consciously. And then when that thought goes away, we're changing the function of the unconscious mind. We're changing the fabric of the unconscious mind, so that when the next thoughts come forward, they may be a little less potent.
Right.
We know this when we're trying to condition ourselves to new habits or whatever. But so many of our thoughts, they say 60,000 thoughts a day we have. So many of them are just simply loop,
Automatic. Yeah.
automatic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the unconscious mind. And then finally, the one is the buddhi, and this is the root of Buddha, the awake, the it's just wisdom. It's a state of
Intellect.
consciousness.
It's
Yeah,
the
that
highest
it's the
state of intellect.
access. Say again.
They like I learned that they say it's the highest state of intellect. This is the highest awareness.
Mm,
Where you're just completely observing the observer, and so you're no longer attached to a material um outlook. You're not attached to ego. I was taught ego is materialistic. Ego will try to go towards the material, where Buddhi is the intellect. It's really just observing without the attachment of the material.
Mm, mm, yeah. I was thinking with my friend Manju. She's from India, and I
Mm-hmm.
taught with her. Melissa and I, we taught with her in Saudi when we lived in Saudi, and she we were talking about this, and she goes, "Oh, from India, we tell our children." She said all the time. I said, "Use your booty." You know, where they're like doing a poor
Yeah,
decision, like you're riding your skateboard off the roof.
yeah. Use your
What are you
Buddhi.
doing? Use your booty.
Yeah.
Where's your booty, dude? Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So that was really interesting. So, yeah, it's still part of in some families within India in the culture. It's still a term that's used, which is interesting.
Mm.
What I find interesting about the booty is it's a conscience, but it's not a conditioned conscience. It's not a cultural conscience where you're taught to feel this way. This is right. This is wrong. Because what's 30 years ago is not right today, and what's right now ain't going to be right 30 years ago, years from now. If history and cultural norms are any sign of what's to come, right?
Right.
That's in flux. But what's truly right and truly wrong, that doesn't change. We know that deep down inside. Through the booty, that's communicated through that function of the mind. That reflects the inner wisdom of the center of being, but it does let me say it again, that reflects the consciousness of higher wisdom, which is it's the mirror. So what we're doing through the practice of meditation is we're cleaning off the mirror so that the reflection of the higher consciousness is clearer rather than being clouded by those other functions of mind. The previous slide we showed that oblong wheel, that oblong spoke. It's not a coincidence that that's actually the ego spoke, right? Our culture is driven primarily by ego. I shouldn't say culture, but it is culture. It is primarily ego.
It's a
But I don't
environment.
mean to like I'm not interested in trying to beat down our culture, because there's a lot of beauty to our culture and a lot that we should be celebrating rather than only seeing the negatives of it. But um, that we're primarily driven by ego, and if we're not primarily driven by ego, we're primarily driven by the senses and just unconscious habitual processes. We're not even critical about what it is that we're doing half the time. We're just but the unconscious is good too. Those habit patterns I've said before, like we wouldn't get past 9 a.m. if it wasn't for the unconscious mind.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
No, we just simply wouldn't. It's just so much of that we have to appreciate. It's just sifting through it consciously, you know. So to get to the point of what we were talking about before, now that we have these contemplations or the awareness of this particular knowledge, when we're talking about the imbalance exists first and primarily within the mind,
yeah. Mm.
and then the physiological experiences are had. The bridge between our deepest sense of self, our deepest, truest self, capital S, not lowercase s, the I, the capital I, not the lowercase I, that 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 is essentially the harmonious existence within the mind, because it's a balanced process and a balanced function. Then the thoughts, words, and the actions are going to be skillful.
Mm.
And then the feeling that we have, not just in the words and in the actions and in the thoughts, but the feeling of the body itself, the essence is going to be in greater balance and more harmony, right?
Right.
Healthier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not simply just observing the mind, right? It's about exercising, it's about eating, it's about doing all the things that we need to do to keep the mind healthy, burn off the excess tension and stress that we get from the day, from our ambitions and whatever they may be, you know. Um, it's a process of going through and
Yeah.
having a healthy relationship.
And also when we're talking about all that the change and observing and being aware of the imbalance, it's so important. Today's card that I pull spoke about authenticity and being, showing up in the universe, knowing that there exists not only you, but others, but being authentic to yourself from the inside, connecting to
Mm,
you, and really showing up and speaking that truth and setting healthy boundaries. So when we talk about these four minds, we're talking about how balanced you are with yourself. I mean, it has to start with you first before you can influence anybody else. And so when we talk about meditation and doing the meditation to control the thought and rewire some bad behavioral patterns that we've noticed, because once we start noticing, we can start changing.
Yeah.
The thing about changing, though, you have to want to change. You have to have a will or a need or desire or of importance. It is important for me to show up my best self.
Mm. I find the idea that came to me just now was the idea of suffering,
Yeah,
and you'll you'll change eventually or you won't.
right. Yeah,
But the degree of suffering in my own personal life, that's actually typically the catalyst where I'm tired of suffering in whatever degree it might be. It's
yeah,
not a life is collapsing around me and my universe is crumbling suffering, but just not feeling good.
yeah,
Or even just the suffering that I experience within the mind of the voice saying you should be exercising, you should be exercising, you should be doing your yoga, you should be just shut
yeah,
up. All right, I'll do it. You know what I mean? So I just do it so it shuts up. you know
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm going to start a 21-day challenge about tapping into your intuition, because when you hear Steve and I talk about, our minds are saying, no, we don't want to have that donut. We should have this because this is what's better. That's our intuition, and that's our tapping into our intuition. But it also comes, the intuition sharpens the more you meditate. That's just a clue.
Yeah, and also two things. One, we're actually by taking those actions, we're actually, according to the conversation we're having, we're calibrating the mind.
Yes.
And once it's more calibrated, it's going to function better, and therefore the booty has a more natural role in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's at the table. It's not sitting across the room in the corner in a chair. It's
Yeah.
at the table with the conversation. And at times, like we said before, with all due respect, I'm about to crush this donut. I'm going. You know what I mean? And I have no guilt about it. And it's good. It's all good. You know what I'm saying? So, and I'm like, okay, I'll go for it. But in the booty would say, actually, you know what? Yeah, it's in this case, it's okay. It's not a problem.
When you
Um,
said that, it reminds me of my service dog Ellie. She's like, I don't care about the diet. Just give me the donut.
no,
Just give
exactly,
me the donut.
exactly. So the human condition and the human mind, we're talking about that. It's interesting to mention, because you're looking at the differences, like it's just a primal response, just driven by the
Yeah,
senses. That's animalistic primal. And the
yeah,
only reason that your dog stops eating is because of the senses,
right.
because she's full.
Yeah,
That's just complete biology, right? And
yeah.
then the ego, you go in and you stick your hand around her food,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
That's complete ego. That's complete
right.
separation. Everything is out there. It's a risk, and
Yeah.
it's going to threaten me getting what it is that I want, which is this food, and I'm going to rip its hand off if that's what is required. That's Now you can use that analogy with the human condition all the time. We see it everywhere. We see it everywhere.
Mm.
And what's interesting about this, the second thing I wanted to mention was we're reprogramming what they're calling
Synaptic neural
there's
patterns.
the synaptic process neurologically, but with the Vedic tradition, what their belief is, like yes, and they're saying it's actually what the way they see is samsaras um,
Mm.
are the processes um, uh, of habit patterns within the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And last night when we were talking about the ups and the downs that we experience.
Right.
There's in their tradition is the sukha and the dukkha, the
Ah.
up and the down. And the further you go down, the higher you can go. The higher you go, the further down you're going to go. And you see this, I think I'm completing a couple of ideas. Hopefully you're with me and
Oh,
everyone
yeah.
listening is with me. But you look at an athlete that wins a championship or scores a goal. I get a kick out of soccer posters. These people are screaming like they just literally annihilated poverty when they score a goal. Like no one is gonna die for the rest of, like, we just saved world peace by scoring. Like everybody just goes out of their minds. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
what happens to that athlete when they lose the championship? They go from here all the way down. So yeah, score your goal. you're going to go up there, and that's awesome to celebrate, but the opposite is true. You're going to get there eventually. So by
Mhm.
staying in the middle, like, yeah, enjoy, but just don't go out of your mind. And then
Right.
if you have the down, you have the down, take the down, but you're not stuck down here. Those mood swings are right. So we have that within the mind. That's natural. 2 days ago, I was just personally, just speak for myself, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, the evening, it was just in a depressive mood. It's just
Mhm.
where the vibration was. It was what it was. You
Yeah.
know, it doesn't mean anything. It is what it is. And if you just know that that's the way the waves come, then just it's not personal.
Yeah.
Um, and as we're reprogramming the synaptic connections, the samsaras, what we're doing is we're rerouting the processes of thinking. And it's like analogous to the river. We're taking a finger off of the Mississippi River, and we're just doing a little track of getting new water to move a little bit. A little bit of new water to move, a little bit of new water to move. And the more and more, that water will actually start to dig its own hole.
Right. I
And then
want to.
eventually the river becomes diverted. And the logic and thinking and the entire functioning of the mind becomes a different process. But it's work. You cannot move a river by willing it. You have to take action. And you must do something with the thought when it's occurring. And that is the practice. That's the religion. That's the sacred practices that you decide to engage in. It doesn't even need to be, but it becomes religious in a sense of this is your practice of living. How are you handling and what are the systems that you put into place, um, or don't?
I want to show you something when you were talking about the up and down.
Mm,
When we talk about biofeedback, right, and we use biofeedback to show people exactly what's going on in their life. Um,
mm,
so when we talk about that coherence, and that ups and down, if you take a look at that red up here up in the top,
yeah.
that's when you're just not even, you're just living on auto. Everything that comes in your way, you react to. You're reacting. Versus the blue, where you're aware of the breath, you're taking control. You're feeling, you might be feeling some depression, but you're using your breath to just stay in that more level plane. And as you go along, you're just in sync with your heart and your brain. And so it's
Mm,
so important to realize that if we just live on auto all the time, we're just going up and down.
utter storm, utter
And
storm.
sometimes there's that vibration of defeat, and that up and down drops so low, but because you were up and down so much, you're not able to see that you're going down low enough, and then boom, it surprises you. and
Well,
then
what's interesting, I'm sorry, go ahead.
and then
I
you
didn't mean.
have to proactively observe and get out of that vibration.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah,
It could be
what were you
tough to do,
saying?
man. If you're particularly, I find if you're in that like that death spiral
Yeah,
of emotion, and like really talk about, like, you're down there, and like you're dealing with depression, or
yeah,
you're dealing with whatever it may end up being. And it's something that takes time. It's a process. Healing is a process. It's not an event.
yeah.
It's a
So,
process.
see, and this is very interesting because we want to understand and we want to acknowledge that we're not perfect and we can't just use the breath all the time. But when we are mindful, when we just stay in the center and observe and see where we are, and be authentic about our feelings and our thoughts, instead of saying nah, it's all right, or nah, that's not really what's, or just completely disassociate, you're not being centered. You're not going inward to say, okay, I can observe the space between that feeling and that thought or that action. It's so vital. What we're trying to tell you, to teach you guys, is it's so vital to just remain in the center. And despite the condition, whether it's fear, anger, or depression, we can maneuver our way out of it. There is a way out of it. And
One thing that's come to mind a couple of times in this talk is the idea of, um, I like the analogy of the storm. Being drunk is three sheets to the wind, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't think this analogy is true, but from what I had heard, three sheets to the wind means that if you're in a storm and you're in a ship, you can't have your three sails up or you're going to get destroyed.
Right.
Three sheets to the wind means you have no control. So you
Right.
got to drop the sails. In storms, they don't have the sails up, man. They're taken down
Yeah.
completely. And you just simply got to use the rudder and you just got to ride the storm out. If you're
Right.
in that state, the meditation and the breathing and the body connections and all the practices that we set up is the practice of dropping the sails and
Mm.
coming down and
So
just sitting out and say, you know what, I just need to ride this out. I can't trust the mind right now. And I'm just going to stay centered the best that I can, try to cause as little harm as I can to other people that are around me that have to live with me. Or maybe they're the ones that are in that state. They're the ones that are in the depressed state or in the fearful state or the anxious state. And it's a spouse or it's a friend, and you need to be there for them in a state of simple, centered presence. It's not about you, it's about them, just being there for them.
yeah.
There doesn't need to be the response. It's not personal, right? And then with that sense of centeredness, you can then realize my ego is not going to be the one that is offended. My ego is not going to be the one that's going to be tired or resist this or resent whatever's going on. I can be where I need to be for this person and for this friend at this time. But it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that we're a doormat either. It doesn't mean that you're just getting beat up and you're just getting walked on all the time because you just want to be there for people, So we know
Hmm.
that as well. But if the booty's kicked in and if it's imbalanced, it'll say, maybe this is a little too much and maybe we need to draw a line on this person, maybe taking advantage of you a little bit too much, you know? So within that space, the higher consciousness comes forward. Within that space, an awareness comes forward and just a bit of more of a skillful action. That's the goal. Just to be as skillful as we can and just be the best that we can.
And Steve, you just pointed out another great thing about that is the fact that support, just holding space for somebody else is so vital. Science shows, it shows all the time that social support is vital to our wellness. And so
Yeah.
sometimes just sitting there and just saying, okay, I'm here. I'm just going to sit with you.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
helps. And so, how would you like to end this out, Steve? We have about 4 more minutes. This is such a great talk, great topic. And do you want to just do a little wrap up of what was mentioned, and then we can just say our goodbyes to our beautiful
Sure. Yeah.
audience
So
out
essentially, what we discussed is the idea that we have a brain, we've got a heart as organs, but we also have a place to discuss the fact that there are energy centers that are happening with on the more at the level of essence, maybe we could say that, right?
there.
And there's practices and there's things that we can do within meditation that can help calibrate that energy. And as a result, literally getting into the chest and working with those energy centers, or we often will call the chakra centers, but we can get into those areas and know that there's practices that we can do to help facilitate a balanced state. And where an imbalance occurs, according to the traditions of Vedanta, it occurs first within the mind. It shows itself in the mind. Let me clarify that. It shows itself in the mind. And the mind, this interdynamic system between the mind and the body's going to feed the mind, the mind's going to feed the body. So we get this tail wagging the dog situation in a sense.
Yeah.
And eggs having chickens and chickens having eggs and all sorts of crazy stuff, right? It gets all muddy. But we can feel that there is an imbalance, and using the meditative state, we can begin to examine the functions of mind that contribute to the imbalance. Which function is operating? What end is that function serving?
Mm-hmm.
What is its voice? What is the energy behind that movement? Right. And then consciously ask yourself, does this serve my highest and greatest good? Is this a thought that I want to entertain because it's better for me and everyone else? Or is this a thought that I need to sacrifice, let drift away on a cloud, watch it burn in a fire, sacrifice, do something with that thought actively?
Mm-hmm.
Because as you do something with it, it's money in the bank. You're rerouting the processes of mind. And eventually that's going to be the type of thinking that actually is the habit, rather than the short-sighted egoic programming that we may have been having for our entire life unobserved.
Well
Right.
said. So
I think
this,
that's it.
yeah, that's it, and that's
That
what you
easy. It's that
said.
easy. Just do it. Just do it. Yeah.
For sure. No, I think my son is coming to say goodbye to me.
uh,
Oh,
How
and
are you, brother? You going to work?
he's eating a Jamaican patty, so he can't answer.
It'd be funny if it was a donut.
But guys, this leads into get out of here, boy. I love you.
We're doing a podcast, man.
Dude, take your plate.
Do your dishes.
Seriously.
So funny.
But no, this leads into what we're going to do next week, guys. We're going to do a chakra balance meditation, and we're going to lead in by talking a little bit about what the chakras are, what the colors are affiliated with them, and then we're just going to end our session, the last 30 minutes of it, with a chakra balance. And so this is really great information, Steve, and I just absolutely love what we're doing. We're providing for the greater good, and this is not for ourselves, but this is for everyone. And so I just love everything that we're doing.
It's a blessing, yeah.
Yeah. And so
Nice.
guys, thank you so much for all that you've done to sit here and listen with us. And so until next time, I really think you guys are rocking it. All right, so without
Keep
further
going.
ado, keep going. All right, and this is Aletha and Steve saying see you next week.
Be well.